What are you looking at me that way for?
Oh! Hey, you big fathead.
What's the big idea?
In 1962, a reporter found Hollywood's biggest star pouring drinks in a Manhattan hotel. She was using a fake name. Just 20 years earlier, she'd been America's highest-paid actress. The government once asked her to change her hairstyle because it was killing women in factories. Her co-stars called her the bitch and refused to work with her. But the real tragedy started when she was 10. Her father exploded in an oil tanker, and that was just the beginning of a darkness that would follow her forever. She was born Constance Frances Marie Ockelman on November 14, 1922, in Brooklyn, New York. But from the moment she came into the world, her life was filled with sadness. Her father, Harry Eugene Ockelman, worked on oil tankers and was gone for long stretches. Her mother, barely in her 20s, was left to raise her alone. The family didn't have much money, and little Constance grew up without the steady love of a father. She later said she was a tomboy who liked boxing gloves more than dolls. That wasn't just childhood play. It was a shield, a way to cope with the emptiness. Then, at just 10 years old, tragedy hit hard. Her father died in a horrific oil tanker explosion in Pennsylvania. It wasn't just a loss. It was violent, terrifying, and final. Suddenly, her mother was 27, a widow, with no money and a traumatized daughter. The year was 1932, and the Great Depression made everything worse. Within months, her mother remarried a man named Anthony Keene, hoping to build some kind of stable life. But the wound from her father's death never healed, and the new stepfather didn't make things easier. Even as a child, Constance struggled in ways no one fully understood. Her mother later revealed that doctors diagnosed her with schizophrenia. Back then, that diagnosis came with little help, just stigma and confusion. In desperation, her mother enrolled her in acting classes in Hollywood. She believed the stage might calm her mind, but it wasn't therapy. It was a trap. Putting a fragile, mentally ill teenager into the chaos of show business would only add fuel to the fire. The family kept moving. They chased health, hope, and fresh starts across the map. After Anthony Keene was diagnosed with tuberculosis, they moved to Saranac Lake, New York, then Miami, then Beverly Hills. In just 5 years, they lived in at least 6 different places. Each move meant leaving people behind, starting over, trying to pretend they were a normal family. But Constance never really belonged anywhere, and the rootlessness followed her like a shadow. As a teenager, her rebellion took shape. She was expelled from Villa Maria, a Catholic girls' school in Montreal. No one knows exactly why. Maybe she broke rules. Maybe she just couldn't take it anymore. Afterward, she made up a story that she studied medicine at McGill University and planned to be a surgeon. That wasn't true, but she clung to it. It gave her control over a life that never made sense. Later, she even apologized to the university president. He laughed it off. But for her, the lie revealed something deeper, her need to escape reality through fantasy. In high school, now living in Miami, she was known more for her looks than her grades. She entered beauty pageants. She even won the title of Miss Florida. But then they found out she was underage and stripped her of the crown. It was her first taste of fame and of scandal. The pattern was starting. Success, followed by collapse. By 1938, she was 16, living in Beverly Hills, and enrolled at the Bliss Hayden School of Acting. This wasn't just any school. It was MGM's training ground for young talent. Her mother was all in, doing everything to make her daughter a star. At the school, Constance met Gwen Horn, another aspiring actress. That friendship would change her life. One day, she tagged along with Gwen to an audition at RKO Studios. Constance wasn't even there to try out, but somehow she ended up with a small part in the movie Sorority House. Her scene was later cut, but it didn't matter. Director John Farrow noticed her. He was mesmerized by the way her blonde hair fell over one eye, giving her a mysterious, unforgettable look. He remembered her, even if the audience didn't. Then came the transformation. Producer Arthur Hornblow Jr. was looking for someone to star in I Wanted Wings. He saw her screen test and was immediately struck, but Constance Keene didn't sound like a star. He renamed her Veronica Lake. He said her eyes were calm and clear like a blue lake. The name stuck. That same year, Hornblow pulled strings to get her out of her RKO contract and signed her with Paramount Pictures. It was a big gamble. Paramount was a top-tier studio, and they were putting serious money and effort behind this new teenager with the hypnotic eyes. It paid off. I Wanted Wings became a hit, and before it even came out, the press called her the Find of 1941. With sudden fame, Lake stayed strangely grounded. She told reporters she didn't expect her success to last. Only the older actors keep on a long time, she said. I'll go back to medical school. At the time, most saw that as humility. In hindsight, it was hauntingly accurate, because just a few months later, her first major scandal exploded. While filming Sullivan's Travels in mid-1941, Lake was 6 months pregnant and hiding it. No one on set knew. She wore corsets. Legendary costume designer Edith Head made loose-fitting outfits just for her. But her condition became harder to hide. Joel McCrea, her co-star, had been struggling through the shoot. In scene after scene, he was asked to carry Lake. He complained that she felt heavier than expected. Sturgis snapped at him, saying he was weak. McCrea was confused and embarrassed. When he learned the truth about the pregnancy, his embarrassment turned to fury. He refused to speak to Lake. He only talked to her through others. After filming ended, he swore he'd never work with her again, and he meant it. McCrea was offered the lead in I Married a Witch, a major role. He turned it down just to avoid working with Lake. Frederick March took the part instead. McCrea later told friends, "Life is too short for 2 films with Veronica Lake." That comment spread through Hollywood like wildfire. And because McCrea was known as one of the nicest, most easygoing actors in the business, it stuck. From then on, directors and co-stars approached Lake with caution. By late 1941, the peekaboo look had taken over America. Life magazine called it a cinema property of world influence. In its November 24th issue, the magazine devoted 3 full pages to Lake's hairstyle. They measured the number of hairs, the thickness, the exact length. Salons across the country were flooded with women asking for the Lake look. It was everywhere. Even Groucho Marx joked, "I opened my mop closet and thought Veronica Lake fell out." But then came war. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, America was all in on World War II. Women were going to work in factories, and that peekaboo hair started getting caught in machinery. It caused injuries and accidents. In 1943, the War Manpower Commission reached out to Lake directly. They asked her to change her hairstyle for the sake of national safety, and she did. Lake appeared in a public service announcement. She looked straight into the camera, pinned her famous hair back, and showed the risk of wearing it loose around factory equipment. She promoted the safer victory roll style, and the nation followed. It was the only time in history a movie star's hairstyle became a national security concern. Veronica Lake didn't just light up the screen. She practically set it on fire. At just 4'11" and under 100 pounds, she was one of the smallest stars in Hollywood. But paired with Alan Ladd, who was only about 5'6" himself, something rare happened. Their height actually worked for them. In an industry where most male leads had to tower over their co-stars, Lake and Ladd looked perfect together. There was no need for apple boxes or camera tricks, just natural, easy chemistry. When they first teamed up for This Gun for Hire in 1942, the magic was instant. So instant, in fact, that Paramount rushed them into the glass key before the first film was even out. Audiences loved it. So did the studio. Over the next few years, they made a total of 7 films together, including The Blue Dahlia in 1946 and Saigon in 1948. Their scenes felt intimate, and believable. Because the camera didn't have to lie, they simply fit. But what the camera didn't show was how much work went into making Lake look like a towering femme fatale. Behind the scenes, costume designer Edith Head had to get creative. Head knew how to stretch the illusion. She kept Lake in sleek, simple outfits with long sleeves and plunging necklines to draw the eye up and down. Streamlined silhouettes with subtle bodice details added to the effect. And under every outfit, Lake wore tall platform heels. One of Head's creations, a cream silk tunic with brown paisley from Saigon, had tiny buttons and side slits that made Lake seem taller than she was. The vertical lines were no accident. Head, who was only 5'1" herself, understood how to turn short actresses into screen goddesses. She'd done it before, but with Lake, the illusion had to be perfect. The audience couldn't know, and most of them didn't. On screen, she looked powerful and poised. In person, many were shocked to see how small she actually was. At one point, Veronica Lake was one of the highest-paid women in Hollywood. She was making $4,500 a week, the kind of money that would be worth over $75,000 a week today. But that success didn't last. It all started to fall apart with a single film. That film was The Hour Before Dawn, released in 1944. In it, she played a Nazi spy named Dora Bruckmann, a cold, unsympathetic role that didn't sit well with audiences. But it wasn't just the character that turned people away. It was her hair. For years, her iconic peekaboo hairstyle had become her trademark. But during the war, the government asked her to change it to encourage safer hairstyles for women working in factories. She listened, and fans hated it. The new look was a flop. So was the film. Things only got worse from there. While shooting the movie, Lake tripped on a lighting cable. The fall sent her into premature labor. Her baby boy was born too early and didn't survive. Within weeks, she filed for divorce. In a matter of months, she lost a child, ended a marriage, and watched her film tank at the box office. Audiences rejected the new Veronica Lake, and so did the studio. The mystique that had made her famous was gone. Behind the scenes, her drinking spiraled out of control. By 1943, people on set noticed she couldn't remember her lines. She showed up late. She didn't seem to care. Unlike her male co-stars, who were often forgiven for bad behavior, Lake wasn't. Directors and studio heads called her unprofessional. Some just refused to work with her again. Her alcoholism got worse. By 1952, it had triggered a complete breakdown. She boarded a solo flight from Los Angeles to New York, in what witnesses later described as a fit of madness. Her mind was unraveling. Doctors said alcohol was making her schizophrenia worse. She drank to numb the pain, but it only made everything more dangerous. No studio wanted to touch her. That same year, she landed her last major role. After that, the scripts stopped coming. Then came the whispers. Then the name-calling. Around Hollywood, people didn't just think Veronica Lake was difficult. They called her the bitch. And not quietly. Actor Eddie Bracken once said, "She was known as the bitch, and she deserved the title." Frederick March, who starred with her in I Married a Witch, hated her so much he nicknamed the film I Married a Bitch. When asked to work with her again, he reportedly said, "Life's too short." She had that same effect on others. Joel McCrea said the exact same thing after Sullivan's travels. She had shown up on that set 6 months pregnant without telling anyone. The director, Preston Sturges, was so furious he had to be physically held back. McCrea swore he'd never work with her again. He eventually did, but it was clear her reputation was taking over. And not in a good way. By 1948, she was only 26 years old, still young by Hollywood standards, but Paramount decided to cut her loose. She had gone from a top-billed star to a liability. 2 more flops, The Sainted Sisters and Isn't It Romantic, sealed her fate. The studio didn't see a future with her. She was dropped. She tried to start over at 20th Century Fox, but it wasn't the same. The big roles stopped coming. The paychecks got smaller. The spotlight dimmed. For someone who had once been the face of Hollywood glamour, it was a brutal fall. In July 1943, something happened that changed Veronica Lake's life forever. She was 7 months pregnant with her second child while filming The Hour Before the Dawn. One morning, she rushed to a Groucho Marx radio session. On the way, she tripped over a lighting cable, slammed into a table, and hit the floor. That fall triggered premature labor. She was rushed to Good Samaritan Hospital and gave birth on July 8th. Her baby, William Anthony Detley, weighed only 2 pounds and 14 ounces. At that time, babies that small rarely survived. She stayed by his side for 7 days. She barely slept. She barely spoke. She just hoped. Katharine Hepburn, who happened to be passing through the hospital, saw her and offered quiet comfort. But on July 15th at 10:10 a.m., Veronica held her baby as he died in her arms. Later, she said it was the most painful moment of her life, and she never fully recovered. The loss of her son destroyed what was left of her marriage. Veronica had married art director John Detley in 1940 when she was just 18 and he was 32. But the pressures of fame had already pulled them apart. The death of their child made the damage permanent. Just weeks later, Veronica walked away. No fight, no discussion, just a note saying she couldn't do it anymore. Their divorce became front-page news, full of ugly accusations. By December, it was over. Veronica kept custody of their daughter Elaine. John remarried in 1946. Veronica would never find stable love again. DeToth had a violent streak. He was cold, controlling, and cruel. He blocked her from reading scripts. He even hid job offers. He didn't want her career to recover. They had 2 children, Michael in 1945 and Diana in 1948. But by 1952, the marriage collapsed, and the custody battle was vicious. DeToth used her drinking and depression against her. He won. She lost both children. She would barely see them again. Veronica Lake's fall from Hollywood wasn't just a slow fade. It was a dramatic crash, and it all exploded in 1952. Her home was seized by the IRS over unpaid taxes. Her movie career had collapsed. Her marriage was on the rocks. She couldn't take it anymore. With no warning, she climbed into her family's private plane and flew solo across the country, from Los Angeles to New York, leaving her husband, Andre DeToth, and their children behind. Witnesses later called it a fit of madness. It was more than just a mental break. It was the moment years of pressure, untreated schizophrenia, alcoholism, and the suffocating demands of fame finally took her over. That flight wasn't planned. It was dangerous. It was desperate. But to her, it was freedom. Looking back, she said, "They said, she'll be back in a couple of months. Well, I never returned. Enough was enough already. Did I want to be one of the walking dead or a real person?" That flight marked the true end of her Hollywood career and the beginning of a long, painful exile. In New York, she threw herself into television. It was all she had. In the first 3 months, she did at least 9 shows. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't pay well, but it kept her alive. Television in the early 1950s wasn't what it is now. For a former movie star to appear on live TV was seen as a step down. But Lake didn't have the luxury to care. She went live, week after week, battling schizophrenia and alcohol while trying to remember lines. On The Milton Berle Show, she improvised with a mink coat and made the audience laugh, briefly reminding everyone why she had once been a star. But the stress of live television pushed her to the edge. Every show was a gamble. Every moment could collapse. Still, it gave her something her life sorely lacked: purpose, even if it didn't last. Then came the stage work. It was supposed to be her new start. Instead, it turned into humiliation. In Voice of the Turtle, the theater promoted new special effects using real running water. But on opening night, it failed. The water didn't flow, and Lake was left stranded in a broken production. Things got worse. In a live performance of Peter Pan, the flying mechanism malfunctioned. She dangled mid-air, hanging awkwardly in front of the audience, stuck and helpless. The crowd laughed. She didn't. These weren't just technical errors. They mirrored her real life, once flying high, now broken and exposed. She pushed through, touring in small productions while caring for her children alone. The days of red carpets and studio contracts were over. Now, she was a single mother with a fading name, clinging to whatever work she could find. Before it all fell apart, she tried one last time to return to film. In 1951, she took a role in Stronghold, a low-budget Western shot in Mexico. It cost just $519,000 to produce both the English and Spanish versions. Critics called it a mess. Confused, wooden, unconvincing. Those were the kind words. Even worse, she and other cast members weren't fully paid. Lake was supposed to receive $47,500. By 1958, she'd only received $13,128. She filed a lawsuit in 1962, but it was too late. The damage was done. Andre de Toth was furious she'd taken the role. He later admitted he'd been intercepting scripts meant for her. This final failure left them bankrupt. Lake never recovered. The film was awful, the experience was worse, and the fallout broke whatever was left of her confidence. By the 1960s, Veronica Lake had all but vanished. She was no longer famous, just forgotten. Her mind, already fragile, began to spiral. She believed the FBI was watching her. She thought her phone was tapped. She shut herself in cheap apartments, sometimes for days. She refused to see people. Friends described her as unrecognizable, missing teeth, tangled hair, and bloated from alcohol. She believed in conspiracies. She lived in fear. ChatGPT said, in 1962, a tip landed on a New York Post reporter's desk. It sounded too strange to be true. Veronica Lake, once a glamorous Hollywood icon, was reportedly working as a barmaid under the name Connie de Toth, the last name of her ex-husband, director Andre de Toth. The place? The Martha Washington Hotel, a modest boarding house in Midtown Manhattan for working women. Gone were the red carpets and studio lots. Now, the 42-year-old was pouring drinks for strangers, smiling, and saying she liked it. "I like people. I like to talk to them," she said. But the story was too juicy for the press to handle gently. Lake had been a huge name in the 1940s, starring in hits alongside Alan Ladd. Then, she vanished. Most people assumed she retired quietly, but this barmaid sighting made headlines across the country. It painted her as broke, washed up, and forgotten. The public responded fast. Letters, money, even checks flooded in from sympathetic fans who thought she was in need. But Veronica Lake wanted none of it. She returned every cent. "I wasn't broke," she said. In fact, she was paying $190 a month in rent, around $1,900 today. That wasn't desperate. That wasn't poor. She was just living quietly, on her own terms. She hated how the press spun it. To her, being a waitress wasn't shameful. It was honest. Still, the media frenzy did stir up some attention, and that led to a role in an off-Broadway revival of Best Foot Forward in 1963. She even shared the stage with a young Liza Minnelli. It wasn't a full comeback, but it was something. In 1966, she tried again. A low-budget Canadian film called Footsteps in the Snow gave her another shot at the screen. She was paid $10,000, but the film was so poorly distributed, it barely existed. Few saw it. Even fewer remembered it. She left the set without seeing a final cut. That same year, she took a job as a Saturday night movie hostess on WJZ-TV in Baltimore. But nothing clicked. She was 46. The Hollywood that once adored her had moved on. By 1969, Lake had stopped chasing the spotlight. Instead, she told her story. Her autobiography, Veronica, shocked everyone. She tore down the old myth. "You could put all the talent I had into your left eye and still not suffer from impaired vision," she wrote. She called herself a sex zombie, not a symbol, just someone used for her looks. The book wasn't glamorous. It was bitter, brutally honest. She spoke about her failed marriages, Her flings with men like Howard Hughes and Aristotle Onassis, her alcoholism, and the guilt of neglecting her children. She boiled her career down to one thing: I just used my hair. The book gave her just enough momentum to make one final film, Flesh Feast, a cheap horror flick released in 1970. It was her last screen appearance, but her health was already fading. Years of heavy drinking had destroyed her liver. She was diagnosed with cirrhosis and acute hepatitis. By early 1973, things were getting worse. She was living in the U.S. Virgin Islands when she got sick and flew to New York. Then she was moved to Vermont for better treatment. She ended up at the University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington. That move puzzled many. Why Vermont? Some said she was visiting friends. Others believed she had no ties there at all. Maybe she went because Saranac Lake, where she had happy childhood memories, was nearby. Maybe she wanted to die near a place that once felt like home. In the hospital, she was alone. Her children never visited. Neither did her ex-husbands. Local people from Burlington came by, curious to see the once famous actress. She signed autographs. She smiled, but behind that smile was pain, both physical and emotional. She was confused, paranoid, and slipping fast. Even in a hospital bed, she was a figure of fascination, but no one stood by her side. Veronica Lake died on July 7, 1973. She was 50 years old. The cause was acute hepatitis and kidney failure. No one from her family was there. It reportedly took days for someone to even identify her body. Once, she had been the face of Hollywood. Now, she was gone, quietly, and mostly forgotten.